Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and much appreciated you guys coming around the channel and checking it out today. Really appreciate that. And guys, today I want to have an in-depth advanced talk on fishing boat docks. Boat docks are probably one of the top bass fishing structures around lakes, around most lakes across the country. Most lakes have docks in them. You know, some have a lot more than others, but as our lakes get more developed, guys, there's going to be more and more docks on lakes. It's just coming. It's inevitable. Unless you have a lake where there's not any docks allowed, you're going to have to deal with fishing docks at some point. So I want to go into this video with a sort of an in-depth discussion on docks, because there's a ton of variables surrounding docks. They're not a single dock, you know, one size fits all. There's a lot of nuances to each dock, so we're going to dig into that pretty deep in today's video. Also, guys, just a quick reminder: if you guys want to support intuitive angling here, and like the content of the videos here, best thing you can do, guys, is hit that subscribe button. It's a really good way to push those videos out. Share them with your friends. Hit the like button, and if you want to give something back for this information, if you inclined to do so, the best way that you can do it, guys, is just to bookmark and use my tackle warehouse link that's in the description of every video. If you guys have to buy tackle anyway, if you use that link, the channel gets a small percentage on a commission on anything you buy. Like buy a bag of worms, the channel gets a few cents out of it. So really appreciate that. Links are in the description for everything. Okay, I grew up fishing docks because some of the main lakes I grew up fishing, guys, around was Grand Lake in Oklahoma, which is full of docks, and Lake of the Ozarks here in Missouri where I live, which is nothing but wall-to-wall docks. There's like, I don't know, I have tens of thousands of docks on that lake. And I fish docks all over the country, from one end to the other. So let's get into this a little bit about what you need to do. First of all, let's identify the types of docks that you have, because there's several different types of docks, and each one of them, the fish relate different to those docks. Now, first type of docks is a piling type dock, where they've got actual piers in the water. Now, these are found usually on lakes that don't fluctuate very much. So some of the TVA lakes, like all the TVA lakes, have pier type docks. Your tidal rivers have pier type docks. Lake Murray and Lake Norman in North Carolina, pier type docks. So those lakes that don't fluctuate much. Now, the lakes that do fluctuate a lot, like here in Missouri where I live, we have the floating docks that are secured, by cables to the bank, and they just float freely over the water. They're not anchored into position like the pier type docks. Now, bass relate completely different. So we're going to break it up in piling docks and floating docks in today's video. And also, you got different sizes of docks. You have condo docks that have lots of slips in them, individual resident docks that have one slip in them, marina docks. So there's a lot going on with that. And docks are complicated. There's a complex piece of structure for the bass to relate to. So let's talk about the piling docks first, and we'll get into the floating docks. Now, the piling docks are different because you don't really have fish suspending very much around a piling dock. Most of the time, a piling dock, the fish are going to be relating to the bottom and relating to the shade. So one of the first things that you have to do is you have to determine which part of the dock, in other words, which pilings are going to be the most productive, because a lot of those piling docks, they may have 20 or 30 pilings on them. Now, the depth that the fish are going to use on a piling docks is directly equated to the water clarity. For the most part, if you have water clarity that is, say, under 3 foot in visibility, those fish are going to be most of the time in 5 foot or less. So they're going to be on those pilings that are in anywhere between, say, 2 to 5 feet is going to be the key range for that. If you have cleaner water, which is not real common, it's not real common on these lakes to have water visibility of over 3 feet on a piling dock. They could be deeper. They could be down to 8 to 10 feet or however deep the outside pilings are. But from my point of view on a piling dock, I like to concentrate on the docks that are in, like I said, 2 to 5 foot of water, and I prefer a piling dock to have water visibility of anywhere between, say, 1 to 3 feet. 1 to 2 foot is really perfect. Most of the time on a piling dock, you're going to find out that the fish are always relating to the shade. There's a lot of shade that comes off on a piling dock and on the pilings themselves based upon the time of the day, and also a lot of piling dock lakes also have current running through there, because a lot of these lakes that don't fluctuate much, they pull a lot of current, because so you're dealing with lakes that have a lot of current on piling docks. For example, all you guys that fish Alabama, like Logan Martin Lake is a prime example of a lake that has pilings with a lot of current running through that. So this combination of shade and current are going to position the fish to where you need to cast at. The sweet spot for me on a piling dock, and this is true a lot of times on floating docks depending upon the depth, is from the part where the walkway meets the dock, right around that area there, to about halfway down the dock. In other words, halfway out deeper. So say for example, if you walk out on the dock, you're walking down the walkway and you first step on the dock, that part out about 5 feet is going to be key. All those pilings through there, it seems like that's where the bigger fish relate to, and that's where I really try to target it. One of my favorite piling type dock patterns to fish is to go to those docks that are like in the back of the coves, like in real shallow water, where you got the outside pilings are only in like 3 foot of water. I love those. I catch a lot of fish on there. Bait wise, there's a lot of different lures that can work on them. My number one bait for boat docks that have piling docks is a soft plastic stick bait like a Senko or Zoom's Linky. I've caught more bass by far on a Senko type bait than any other lure on a piling dock. And based upon how the fish are positioned, I may use it wacky style, I may use it on a shaky head, I may use it on a Texas rig, I may use it weightless. But if I had one way to rig it that I've caught more than anything, it's putting it on like a light sinker, like a 1/16 of an ounce or 1/8 ounce slip sinker, pitching it like on 15-pound test line and just methodically working those pilings. That's my favorite way to catch them on there. I don't hardly ever use a moving bait on a floating dock. Once in a while, I'll skip a floating worm or something under there or fluke, but most of the time it's a Senko or a jig or a creature bait. Okay, now for the floating docks, they're a little bit more complicated because they're usually set up different. Because floating docks can be, again, individual residential docks, marina docks, condo docks, whatever you're going to have with that. And you've got more options for the bass to use, again, based upon the water clarity. Because on a floating dock, the bass can be anywhere between right on the bank where the walkway is, all the way out to the end of the dock in deep water. Because on a floating dock, you're going to have some bass suspending on that dock, and some bass are going to be on the bottom based upon the water depth. And they can be, on a floating dock, you can have bass suspended on the dock and on the bottom on the same dock. So here's the way that I usually approach that. First of all, I try to target the sides and the outside part of any floating dock for those suspended fish. One of my favorite ways to do it, guys, is to run a jerk bait or a spinner bait or a swim bait or something like that down the corners and down the sides of the docks, just underneath these floats. Even it doesn't matter what the water visibility is. It can be dirty, clean, in between. You're going to have some fish that suspend underneath those floats. That's just a really good way to catch them. The next thing on the sides and the fronts of those docks is pay close attention on your electronics for any brush piles, because a lot of docks out there, they crappie fish on them and they put brush piles out on them. If you see any brush out on the sides and the fronts of the docks, make sure you fish that brush with like a jig or a plastic worm. But as far as on the bottom, the key depth on the bottom on a floating dock is that all that water 10 feet or shallower. So in other words, if I get to a boat dock, and it doesn't matter how many slips are in it or if it's one slip, I'm going to be concentrating on fishing the bottom in 10 foot or less, again, depending upon the water visibility. If the water visibility is like 1 to 2 foot, I'm going to be fishing 5 foot or less. The water visibility is like 2.5 to 4 feet. I'm going to work down into 10 foot of water. A lot of different lures are going to work there. One of my favorite ways to catch them is either on a shaky head or a finesse jig. So I'll pitch all that water depth on the inside part of the dock around the walkways, just like on the piling docks, the first 5 feet from where the walkway meets the main dock, and just fish everything. Fish the boat slips, fish the outside of the dock, try to get those baits into hard to reach places, look for shade, concentrate on there down to 10 feet. Now, one of the key areas on a floating dock as long as the water temperature is not cold, as long as that water temperature is over mid 50s, the walkways on a floating dock are super high percentage spots. In fact, if you gave me a boat dock and say, Randy, you can fish in one place around that boat dock, it would be where the walkway meets the dock over about 5 foot up the walkway. Bass love to hold in those areas. Number one is because that's a very desirable depth of water. Usually it's a little bit shallower, but you have cover close by. You've got the cover of the dock close by. You've got the right water depth for those fish to be in, and those fish are protected because they're hard to get to, because most of the time you got cables connecting these docks to the bank, so you have to cast either over or under the cables to get underneath the walkway, and there's usually some shade and tight places, but that's where you want to get. So if you're going to fish dock walkways, you have got to learn how to skip a bait. And if you don't know how to skip a bait on a bait caster, I don't like skipping on a bait caster, use a spinning rod. This will work on any lake in the country. Take a shaky head with like a 1/16 of an ounce head, or maybe a small swim bait, or a finesse jig, or a wacky rig Cinco, and just skip it underneath those walkways with a spinning outfit. That is a great way to catch bass all year round. Most of the time in the springtime, I'm using like the wacky rigs, Cincos, that type of stuff. And as it warms up, or in the fall, I go to a smaller finesse jig and catch a lot of them doing that. So anyway, guys, that's just sort of an overview with it. Like I said, every dock's going to be different, but bass live on docks, and that's the thing about it. It's like one of the reasons that docks are so good is because there's so many places on a dock that you can't get a bait to, and those fish are protected and they know it. It's like when you catch fish off a boat dock, you're probably catching 5% of the fish that are on that dock. 95% of the bass that are on a boat dock, you can't get to them. They're positioned on places within that dock, especially on the floating docks, that are literally physically impossible to make a lure presentation to. I've seen them down there, so just fish for the ones that you can with that. So anyway, hope it helps out, guys, and we'll check in later. See you.